Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to your weekly astrological weather. This is your place to get practical guidance for not only surviving the cosmic tides, but thriving with them. I'm your host, the founder of Astrology Hub, Amanda Walsh, and I am so thrilled to be here today with author, historian, and astrologer Christopher Renstrom. And Christopher, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor and a privilege.
Well, you are the first astrologer that we are working with that is kicking off our new format of this show, which I'll be talking about in just a second. For those of you who are saying, "Where's Anne? I miss Anne. Where is she?" I just wanted to point you back to episode 404. So episode 404, which we did at the end of November, was our final weekly weather episode with Anne Ortley. We talk about why, we talk about what's happening next. So you can check that out. I also wanted to send you in the direction for those of you who just love Anne and can't get enough and want to stay in touch with her and you miss her. You can actually follow her on her own podcast and via her website. So if you go to Astrology Hub, if you go to AnneOrtley.com, you'll find her podcast. You can sign up for her newsletter. You can sign up for upcoming courses and things that she's doing. And we are wishing Anne only the best and wishing her all kinds of success. And she's now in Florida, so she's in a whole new environment. And so just go to AnneOrtley.com, check it out. And she does a weekly podcast on Sundays, a solo podcast. So you'll be able to stay in touch with Anne and her weekly weather. Yeah, she's been doing it for years. I mean, long before we did our weekly weather. Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Okay. And so today we are kicking off our new format where we will be a little bit more like the Astrology Hub vision, not a little bit more, but a lot more like the Astrology Hub vision, where we are going to be featuring different astrologers every week. At some point, we may actually get down to a core group of a few astrologers. So if we have astrologers that are featured over the next couple months that you're like, oh my gosh, yes, please bring this person back, please let us know in the chat. And so we will probably at some point have a core group of around 5 to 6 astrologers that we have on very regularly, and then bring in some new voices here and there. So the next few weeks, we're going to have Christopher Renstrom today. Then we're having Thomas Miller, who is a new astrologer on this platform. Do you know Thomas, Christopher?
He's terrific. Yeah.
Yeah, he's terrific. I love him so much. We've just recently discovered him. So Thomas Miller, and then Stormy Grace will be after Thomas.
Who's
Scott Tajiran. What?
Who's fabulous. Stormy Grace.
Fabulous, always.
I remember the Stormy Grace fan club. I've got and mugs.
Yes, we're in the Stormy Grace fan club too. And she's our inner circle guide right now. So she's going to be our, after Thomas. Then we have Scott Tajiran, who's also a new find and a new voice on Astrology Hub. Then Jen Zart, who is fantastic. Yes. And she's also an inner circle guide coming up this year.
Yeah.
Divine Harmony, another Astrology Hub favorite. And then we'll have Christopher Renstrom back again.
I feel like I'm auditioning for the host of Jeopardy.
Yes.
But actually, I like what you just described, because it's about different voices. And so you're going to get different astrologers, different astrological perceptions and ways of looking at the cosmos, and how rich and how eclectic. It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
I apologize for this thing of sunlight, which is now in my face. I'm talking to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, and this is the time of day when the sun goes overhead and just
we'll
beams right through. So
we'll get to watch a play or shadow play and
light.
Yes,
you will. Yeah. As it gradually moves its way across the screen.
I've found that it normally underscores the message. Like what you're trying to say, it's like we could find the symbolism in the light play on your face. So we'll be doing that, Christopher.
All right. A new form of facial recognition.
Yes, exactly. All right. So let's start with this week, the week ahead. And if you can just walk us through the major points of the astrology, and then we can have a little conversation about it.
Sure. It's to me, this is pretty much a nice week with maybe one exception, sort of thing. But, and some people out there might be like, nice week. There's a Mercury turning retrograde at the end of it, and we'll get into that in a moment. But I'm actually kind of a fan of Mercury retrogrades. I think that if you really have the sort of right mental outlook going into them, they can actually become really quite enriching and really quite inventive. So believe it or not, and I'm saying it right now. This is before, like, I have to take my car in, or the coffee maker goes belly up, or something like things that happen during a Mercury retrograde. Okay, but maybe I'm tempting fate here, but I happen to really enjoy them. But we're kind of like in one headspace in the earlier part of the week, and then we move into a different one into the latter part. Nevertheless, there is a connecting theme that I am going to try to come back to and bring back up. So the big thing that we're really dealing with at the start of this week and into the middle part of the week is Neptune. All right. Neptune is playing a very, very strong role. And Neptune is as opposite Mercury as you could possibly get. Okay. It's Neptune is a modern planet. It was discovered in the 1840s. And like all the modern planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, these planets represent realms. All right. The classic or traditional planets like the sun, the moon, Mercury. Okay, we'll talk about aspects of a personality. The sun is what you identify with. The moon is how you feel. Mercury is the way that you think and communicate. But when we're dealing with the moderns and the modern planets, the first one is discovered in 1781. That's Uranus, and then it's Neptune, and then it's Pluto. When you're dealing with the moderns, you're dealing with realms. All right, this is part of the reason why they were called the transpersonal planets in the 70s and the 80s. And so with Uranus, the realm that you're literally dealing with, what we would call is outer space. Okay, but where it was understood to the astrologers of the time, Uranus ruled over eternity. Okay, when you remember the Greek myth, and I hope all of you enjoy Greek myths. I strongly encourage that you go out and read them, because we draw so much of our archetypal symbolism and interpretation from the Greek myths, which themselves are a hodgepodge of earlier myths. So it's not even like a staunchly Greek thing. There's already elements from other cultures that appear in that mythology. But Saturn, which we regard as the planet of time in astrology, at the beginning of the world, Saturn is the child of Uranus, who separates Earth from heaven. Okay. So literally, time separates Earth mortality from heaven eternity. And so this is kind of where we're getting into when we get into the notion of Uranus. So Uranus rules over things like ideals, eternal principles, things that have yet to be discovered or imagined, but that they exist in eternity. They exist outside of time. I don't know if there's a weird, strange feedback going on or whatever, but I'm going to carry on through. Okay, so the realm of Uranus is eternity. It's outside of time. The realm of Neptune, okay, equally exotic and far away and not part of our day-to-day experience, is the realm of the ocean. Okay, so Neptune is the Roman title of the Greek god Poseidon. The ocean means so much to us. It covers 3/4 of the planet, but yet if you go to a beach and look out over the ocean, you can see the horizon, you can see the surface of the water, but you can't see underneath it. Okay, and unless you've got scuba gear or submarines or something like that, you can't exist in the ocean either. Okay, you can dive into it, but you can't, freely live and exist there. So what was being set up here by the astrologers with the discovery of the modern planets are these remote realms. We can't exist in space, we can't exist in the ocean. And then finally, Pluto, which is discovered in 1930, is underground. It's the underworld. It's everything that's underneath the surface of the Earth itself. So it's not on the surface. It's not like, oh, there's a field, there's an apartment house, there's a whatever. It's everything that's underneath. So it ruled over bodies, corpses, decay, seeds, but also Pluto, which gives us the root word for plutocracy, which means wealth or moneyed class, also ruled over gold, silver, precious metals, oil, things like that. So whenever we're dealing with Uranus, whenever we're dealing with Neptune, whenever we're dealing with Pluto by transit, we're really dealing with planets that open up realms, okay, into our psyches. They're bigger than what we can understand or absorb. It's also part of the reason of why they take so long to go through one zodiac sign. So you really get that message, of the modern planet. And so this is where they get the sun is now going over. Like, but this is where you get their sort of transpersonal quality. They're not personal like a Mercury or Venus. There's a kind of remote. There's a realm that is into themselves. And so when we're dealing with Neptune, which can be the ocean and underwater and things like that, what we're actually really dealing with Neptune in terms of understanding it in terms of an astrological chart is the invisible world of the spirit that we all know is there, but we can't really, explain. Okay. So Neptune at its root is mystery. Okay. It's the things that are inexplicable. Now, this isn't an Agatha Christie mystery where it's like you solve the riddle and it's Colonel Mustard with the candlestick in the living room is the culprit. It's not a riddle to be solved. Neptune isn't that. Neptune is a mystery. It's a phenomenon that cannot be explained. Okay. And it also rules over, if you're familiar with Carl Jung, the collective unconscious. In other words, the dreaming of the world itself. All right. So it's not just your own personal dream, which would be the moon, it's the dreaming of the world itself. It's the collective dreaming, the collective unconscious, the collective imagination. All streams or rivers or whatever eventually will flow into the ocean, which is Neptune. So it's oceanic in its scope. So just to sort of also unpack that a little bit more, the difference between, let's talk a little bit here about the difference between Sagittarius and Pisces, all right? And you can sort of relate this to the houses that they're associated with. The 9th house is often associated with Sagittarius, and the 12th house is associated with Pisces. Well, in traditional astrology, older astrology, up until the 60s, no, actually it's up until the 60s astrology. Okay, the 9th house is pretty much institutionalized religion. Okay, it's religion as it's practiced in a church, in a temple, in a shrine, in a mosque, in a house of worship. Okay, so the 9th house with its associated to Sagittarius was always associated to the church or house of worship. Okay, so it's something that is codified, something that is scriptural, something that's going to lend itself to laws and to moral codes. Okay, things that are enshrined. Okay, in this way, they're known as being sacred, and this is something that you believe in. Okay. When you're dealing with the 12th house, which is also ruled by Jupiter, or Sagittarius were associated to the 9th, Pisces were associated to the 12th, both Jupiter ruled, you're dealing with the mystic. Okay, so you're dealing with a seer. You're dealing with someone who nowadays we would call it like a shaman. Okay, someone who is sensitive to the invisible forces at play and interacts with them and comes back with some kind of message or vision. Okay, now if you're talking about Europe, that was basically saints back in the day, like in the Middle Ages, and they would have these ecstatic visions of Christ or whatever, and people would flock to them, and they would be full of this inspiration, and this is something that really moved them. Now, mystics were a mixed bag as far as the church was concerned in the Middle Ages in Europe. Okay, on one hand, you needed a mystic because it was proof positive of God active in this world, okay? Whether it was through miracles or through vision, okay? A mystic spoke to people. We have to remember that the church back then is in Latin. Not everyone understands Latin. They're going to church, they're sitting through like a Latin mass that they're not getting, And so a mystic would be like, this is what this scripture from the Bible means, or I had a vision of Christ, or I had this vision here, and people would be like, oh, they've been touched, and this is special. This is proof of God active in the world, okay? And so on, and so this is why you have, during certain centuries, this influx of saints, many of them women, who weren't allowed any sort of post to speak in a church, okay, but like a Catherine of Siena or Saint Teresa of Avila, they could speak or produce these visions, and people were awestruck, and this was proof of God majesty and God present in our world right now. But then the mystics could also get a little bit too wild and crazy. Okay, they could get a little bit too radical. They could be like, the Pope is the Antichrist, or, you have to get rid of this corruption, or, they're taking lots of money away from you for indulgences and things like that. And that's when the church would be like, okay, you're getting a little out of hand. And they would come down and they would have things like inquisitions, or they would have witch burnings. Okay, so you could literally be a saint in one century and a witch in the next. Okay, depending on the disposition of the church itself. Okay, so everyone's probably like, great history lesson, where are we going with this? Okay, where we are going with this is that you may notice that there is this clash in our society between revered authorities who are supposed to be speaking, and I'm just using this as a word, right? Because scripturally, okay, they're supposed to be speaking law, okay, and everyone's supposed to be obeying this in a doctrinal fashion. And then you have another part of society which is very mystic. It's very like, I have this vision or idea. Neptune also rules things like conspiracy theories. Okay, so it can be like, here's an alternative way of looking at it. This is what's really going on. This is the truth that's been relegated to the margins. This is the truth that's been excised from the text. This is the stuff that you really, really need to know about. Okay. And so this is something that, because Neptune is now in Pisces, if you work with modern rulerships, Neptune is the co-ruler, the co-parent of the zodiac sign of Pisces. You have more and more this mystical alternative way of looking at it. This is the real truth, the truth that they'll burn you at the stake if you believe this. Okay. And so this is what the planets are sort of mapping out here in the sky. And this is something that we definitely experienced during the last year and a half when we had the eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius, which were triggering the Neptune. Okay, Neptune is that idea of like, something's in the water. Is it a delusion? Is it an illusion? Like, why all of a sudden do people believe all these crazy, irrational things? This is the realm of Neptune. And Neptune is very comfortable here because the Neptune is the ocean. I get to be irrational. If you want to call it irrational, you can call it that. Other people might call it miraculous. Other people might call it psychic. Other people might call it, the truth that is not being spoken or is being covered up in some sort of way. So you literally have this clash between this is doctrinaire truth, okay, what you should believe, and this is what they're telling you is fiction. Okay, and so there are certain times where this gets flared up. Okay, you can almost think of it as a fever or something like that. It gets flared up, and this week it gets flared up. Why does it get flared up this week? It gets flared up this week because we have a Mars in Sagittarius forming a square to Neptune in Pisces. Okay, both in those signs that I was just sort of walking you through. Now, Mars in Sagittarius, Mars in a horoscope, okay, is always going to make sure that you get what you want. All right, that's Mars's job, is to go on out there and get what you want. And you might get what you want through fight, or you might get what you want through flight. Okay, so Mars rules both directions. Not everything is confrontational. There are 12 zodiac signs, so there are 12 ways that you can express Mars in an astrological chart. Okay, it's not just like fighting and locking horns. It does it in 12 very different ways with 12 very different dispositions. Mars in Sagittarius is what I sort of often refer to as there is no Switzerland. Okay, so with Mars and Sagittarius, you're on one side or you are on the other. Okay, it's that, it definitely picks sides. There's nothing Mars in Libra, impartial, or Mars in Aquarius, objective. There's nothing like that here. Okay, it's a Mars in Sagittarius. It's like you're on the side or you're on the outside, type of thing. So Mars in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is a sign that I like to use the word evangelical with. Okay, I know that might strike people as like a strange word, but evangelical in terms of like, this is what the truth is about, and I'm going to rouse up the spirits, and this is what we're going to believe in. I mean, this is what makes Sagittarius Sagittarius. This is what makes it different from a Leo. This is what makes it different from an Aries, okay, is the call to spiritual action, okay, or spiritual enthusiasm, or belief in faith, are the cornerstone words of Sagittarius, okay, it's Jupiter ruled. So Mars in Sagittarius can be like, this is absolutely it. These are my convictions, these are my beliefs, this is what they're telling you, this is what I'm telling you, so it can get very in your face and rousing up of the spirits. There's going to be no gray area here. Okay, so if you are a Sagittarius, you're going to be feeling this very strongly. If you are a Gemini, you're going to be like having to deal with this really strongly. And if you're a Virgo or a Pisces, you're trying to figure out some way to work with this, although it changed a little bit with Pisces. I'll get to that in a moment with Neptune. So it's kind of like getting up on the pulpit, or the high horse. Okay, that's probably a very easy way of understanding Mars and Sagittarius. So these are my convictions. This is my faith. This is my belief, and it's mine. And you can't cross it. You can't argue with it. I'm not open to argument or discussion. Okay. And a lot of times when we think about faith, belief, and conviction, we kind of think that the opposite side of that is doubt. Okay. And so that can make someone get even more hyperbolic or louder or more puffish, more involved. But another thing that can work against faith or belief, okay, is susceptibility, okay, which is a Neptune word. Okay, Neptune, we often like to use the word sensitive, but there's a susceptibility. Now, I don't mean gullibility, all right, because it's often susceptible is moved into the gullible, you fell for it, column. Okay, what I'm talking about here is being susceptible or sensitive or reactive to. Okay, so when you have this Neptune forming a square to the Mars, Neptune is beginning to introduce other ways of looking at it. Like, how do you, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, maybe it's a truth that's not being discussed. Maybe it's a truth that's been moved to the margins. Maybe it's it's playing the role of the mystic, which is what Neptune and Pisces very much is. And so what this could create is a clash between these truths that I hold to be self-evident and this kind of like mystic attunement to something that is not easily explained. Fire signs want things revealed. Okay, fire signs, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius are into the big reveal. All right. Water signs are into the mystery. Okay, they appreciate, they value the things that are not spoken about, that cannot be easily explained, that can only be shown or represented in symbol, or through through some sort of insight that you get by meditating or contemplating it. So water signs really value secrecy, and secrecy is privacy. Okay, so it's not like secret, I'm ready to deceive you, but secret as in, this is my private space, or this is who I am when I'm away from the public. Okay, so water signs really put a very high value on that secrecy. Okay, that's very important. So you may feel, in general, you may feel like beliefs are being questioned or they're being challenged in some way. And if you find yourself starting to get louder about it, like this is absolutely what it is, I would strongly advise an internal check, okay, with that, because you may be under the sway of not Neptune, but this Neptune-Mars square. Okay, because oftentimes astrologers will talk of the influence of the planets, but we sort of leave out the influence of the aspect. Okay, that the planets are having this influence because it is signature to the aspect that they're forming. Okay, it won't always hold sway, this influence, because the square will not always be there. Mars, being the faster moving planet, will move on. Okay, but remember, Mars is fever. Okay, it rules over fevers, so there may be this kind of like fever dream, that's associated to the square where you need to. Okay, so hopefully I'm communicating to you like an immediacy and an urgency. And, if I'm feeling like I'm on shifting ground, I'm going to become even more determined. That's the thing to watch out for. Okay, that's the thing to watch out for. And you might be dealing with someone this week who is really high on the high horse and pontificating, and the one finger is waved up to God or whatever. Don't engage them. Okay. Take the Neptunian route, which is, okay, we'll let the fire burn out. Water doesn't need water's here. It's 3/4 of the planet. It recycles itself. It doesn't need to make a point. Okay. And the square between the Neptune and the Mars is going to subside. So again, the Mars can get very like boisterous, and the Mars is kind of like almost feeling like it's falling asleep because Neptune can water down the consciousness and the whatever. And so it's like, oh, I have to wake up and get louder. So these are the things to be sensitive to. The second part of the week that I want to share with you is the Mercury retrograde. Okay, and it's the Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, and I kind of made a decision here that I sort of wanted to tell you the story of where Mercury retrograde comes from. Okay, and then we can weave it into the rest of this week's horoscope, or the rest of this week's cosmic weather forecast. Mercury is named after the Greek god Hermes. Okay, and Hermes, by the way, is the root word for hermetic. Okay, secret. Okay, so that idea of secret or an unspoken. Okay, hermetic comes from Hermes. All right. And so in mythology, Mercury is born in a cave in Arcadia, Greece. And Arcadia, Greece is a mountainous, landlocked region of Greece, with lots of shepherds, goats, and cows. Okay, so it's not municipal. It's not a city. It's out. It's agrarian. Okay, it's not even agricultural. It's where you're gonna have your flocks graze. In art history and English literature, we know the term Arcadia, okay? And we're not talking about this mountainous area in Greece necessarily, but Arcadia in art history and literature often refers to a place of rustic innocence and simple, quiet pleasures. It's often portrayed, as I said, as a place where sheep and cattle gently graze, and maybe you throw in a few nymphs there, or shepherd women who've fallen asleep under the rays of the sun. But it's very maybe some garlands and things like that. So it's something that's very lovely. If you're familiar with the landscape, the American landscape artist, he was born in Britain, but he does landscapes here in America, Thomas Cole, he does this series called The Course of Empire, which I really strongly recommend that you can go online and see the pictures. They're really, really lovely. It's really the dawn of civilization up to civilization, and then its fall. Well, Arcadia is when it's still innocent. You have Pythagoras drawing out his first Pythagorean symbols on the dirt, and shepherdesses are delighting, and children are learning Greek, but it's done in this sort of rustic environment. Okay, so this is where Mercury is born. Okay, this is where he makes his first appearance on planet Earth. Now, Mercury's mother, and I want you to keep in mind here, I'm going to go back calling him Hermes and Mercury and Hermes for the sake of astrology. But I want you to keep in mind here, I want to make a quick little note. Mercury rules 2 zodiac signs, and those are the signs of Gemini and Virgo. Okay, Gemini is the sibling, right? It's the twins. So Gemini rules over sibling relationships. And Virgo is the single mother. You're going to see both of these themes come out in the myth of Hermes. So Mercury's mother was Maya. She's a daughter of Atlas. That's the Titan who's holding the Earth on his shoulders. I don't know how he sired children in that position, but anyway, it's Greece. Okay, so she's the daughter of Atlas, and she becomes the secret mistress of Zeus. Now Atlas has a number of daughters. Maya becomes the secret mistress of Zeus. Zeus we know as Jupiter in astrology, and he's the king of the gods here in Greek mythology. But because she becomes the secret mistress of Zeus, Maya, Mercury's mother, is shunned by her sisters, and so she takes up residence in this cave tucked in the side of a mountain in Arcadia, and that's where she gives birth to her illegitimate son, her out of wedlock son, Mercury. And Mercury, moments after he's born, is immediately out and about and making mischief. Okay, so he's not like a kid who's like, in swaddling clothes, staying in the crib or whatever. He's out and like, perky, okay, going out and looking for things to do and trouble to get into. Okay, and indeed in the hymn to Hermes, where we get the story of Mercury, it is said, born in the day, Hermes is born in the day. By midday, well, he harped. I want you to remember that. By midday, well, he harped, and in evening stole the cattle of Apollo. Okay, so this is all done in the cycle of a day. Hermes' first encounter when he leaves the cave of his mother, sneaks out of his cradle. He sees a tortoise. And he looks at this tortoise, and he says, a friend of the feast. Okay, and I want you to remember this. A friend of the feast, he says to this tortoise. And the tortoise kind of looks up at him quizzically, and Mercury immediately strangles the tortoise and scoops out the meat to have just the shell, puts the shell by the side of the cave, and leaves it there to dry. We'll get back to that in a little bit. Okay, but what I wanted to also underscore here for Mercury is the idea of finding, meeting, and discovering. Finding, meeting, and discovering. These are all attributes of Mercury in the astrological chart. Okay, each planet rules over particular attributes, and this is what allows us as astrologers to do interpretations. Okay, so Mercury, we think of him as the messenger planet and how we analyze. But what I love about this myth, finding, meeting, and discovering. This is all Mercury, okay? And so is finding and thieving, okay? These are also attributes of Mercury in the myth, at least. Okay, so after he, scoops out the turtle and puts the shell by the cave to dry, okay, Mercury immediately goes into, a pasture, which is down the road and to the left, okay, which is Apollo's pasture. And Apollo has cattle, okay, in this pasture, and the cattle are gently grazing. What else do you do in Arcadia, right? Okay, so Apollo is the god of the sun. Okay, so the equivalent in astrology to Apollo is the sun sign. Is the sun itself. That's Apollo. And if you look at the sun when it rises and sets, the planet that is closest to it, that you can see 3 times out of the year, but not all the time, is Mercury, the peekaboo planet. Okay, so the sun and Mercury are the closest in proximity and appear together in astrology. This is why they take on these attributes in Hellenized Greece. So in the dark of night, Hermes, okay, and remember he's an infant, right? So it's not like he's like, a tween or a young man or something like that. He's a little baby, okay? What he does is, like, in the dark of night, he hops the fence, okay, into Apollo's pasture where Apollo's sacred cattle are grazing. Now, this is another thing that the Greeks would have understood, but we don't always understand. Cattle are the symbol of wealth in ancient civilization. Okay, everyone sort of thinks, oh, it's Taurus, the second house, that's wealth, that's money. No, cattle were wealth. Okay, so before you were mining coins, okay, before you were digging up gold, before you were creating jewelry, you had cattle. And how much cattle you had determined the wealth that you had. Okay, so when you've got cattle grazing in a pasture and you're protecting your cattle, that's like your bank account grazing in a pasture and you're protecting your bank account. Okay, so cattle means wealth, and so for Apollo to have 50 heads of cattle means he's very wealthy. So Mercury is stealing into his pasture. He's actually got more than 50. Mercury picks out 50, okay, of the cattle, so he's got more than 50. Mercury immediately picks out the 50 best heads of cattle. And to keep Apollo from discovering who had made away with his cattle and which direction the cattle had gone, Mercury goes and he wraps each cow's hoof or bull's hoof, okay, in bark to disguise their prints. And then he ties brooms to each one of their tails. So as they wag their tails, cattle are always, wagging their tails or snapping a fly or whatever, they're actually erasing the tracks as the cattle walk. Okay, so this is part of the ploy. And finally, to confuse Apollo even more, and this is the retrograde part, okay, Mercury Hermes drives the cattle out of Apollo's pasture backwards, all right? And Hermes also fashions bunches of sticks to put to his own little feet, and he also walks backwards in front of the cattle, so that the overall impression that's left after the cattle have exited the pasture is that some sort of giant creature entered Apollo's pasture, and that's it. Like, there's no tracks of anyone having left. All of a sudden, mysteriously, 50 head of cattle are missing. Okay, this is how bright this kid is. Okay, and again, inventiveness, cleverness, wiliness. These are all the things. These are all the attributes of Mercury in an astrological chart. And so, so basically, it looks like a giant had strode on in and stole cattle. And what happened after that? Mercury, Hermes, hides the cattle in a nearby cave, and he sacrifices 2 of them to the gods. Okay, he carves out of these 2 cows, he carves out 12 portions, one for each of, at this time, the 11 Olympian gods, and one, a 12th, for himself. Okay, so he carves out 11 portions for each of the current, register staff of Olympus upstairs, and one for himself. He also takes the entrails of the sacrificed cows, 7, okay, cuts them, dries them, and uses them as strings that when he returns to the tortoise shell, which is dried by the side of the cave, he then strings into the shell, and he creates the first lyre, or what we know of as a harp. Okay, he creates the first harp, the lyre. Okay. He swiftly gets into his cradle. Kratos puts the lyre under his armpit, sucks his thumb and goes to sleep. Well, his mother isn't fooled for a moment, and she's like, "Where have you been? Okay, I've been looking for you all day. Where have you been? What have you been up to?" And he's like, "What I've been up to, mother, is our future." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "We're not going to stay in this cave forever. We're moving on up. We're moving on upstairs to Olympus." She's like, okay. So in the morning, first rays of sunrise, and you have to remember Apollo is associated to the sun, right? First rays of sunrise, Apollo's there in the cave. Okay, he's there in the cave looking down at the cradle at this little creep. Okay, this little baby, and he knows that this little kid has something to do with his cattle missing. Okay, and he confronts Hermes. He accuses him. He's like, "Cattle thief! What have you done with my cattle? And I want you to return them immediately." And Hermes plays the innocent. He's like, "I'm just a little baby. Don't do anything. I just want to go." Apollo's like, "I am not believing this for a minute." So he grabs Hermes by his hair and he zips him on up to Olympus, and he throws a little baby down there in front of the other Olympians who are like, "What's going on here?" And 2 whisper to themselves, "Intrigue." And he confronts him. He says, this is, don't believe the innocent act. This is a thief. This is a criminal. He stole my cattle, and I want answers, and I want answers now. And so Hermes, who is known for craft talk, wily talk, says, "Apollo, what ungentle words have you spoken? And is it thy cattle of the homestead thou seeks? Are you looking for your cattle? I saw them not, heard them not, gave ear to no word of them. No task of this is mine. Hitherto I have other cares. I have other cares like sleep, mother's milk, and about my shoulders swaddling bands and warmed baths." So in other words, like, why are you looking at me? All I care is sleep and mother's milk, and can I go back to my cradle? Okay. So at this point, all the gods laugh hysterically. They think that this is the most uproarious thing that has ever happened, because Apollo, just to sort of give you a backstory here, that whole idea of Greek beauty comes from Apollo. Okay, Apollo is the most beautiful male god in Greek mythology. He has the chiseled six-pack abs, the beautiful long, limbs with musculature, and he's just golden, and Apollo is also daddy's boy. Okay, Apollo knows the mind of Zeus. Okay, because Apollo not only is the god of art, okay, and the muses, he frolics with the muses all day and talks astronomy and poetry and all these sorts of things, but he's golden. Apollo can do no wrong. He's, and he's known also for his arrows, that if you cross Apollo, he'll take you out, with an arrow very, very quickly. So the gods are loving this. Mr. Righteous, is like humiliated by this little kid that looks like it's going to poop any minute. Okay, sitting there on the golden floor of Olympus. But the greater humiliation that I really want to underscore here, and the triumph of Mercury, is Apollo is also the god of prophecy, right? Okay, so he's supposed to be able to see into the future. Well, what does it say when the god of prophecy can't find his own cattle? Not good. Okay, so they're like, and the loudest one to laugh, of course, is Zeus. Okay, who, as you know, is Hermes' illegitimate father. So Apollo's there, having a hissy fit, like, tell me where they are, and Mercury's like, and Zeus intervenes, and it's like, and Zeus steps down off his throne, and Zeus has to be very wary here, okay, because his wife Hera is sitting on the chair next to his, and he recognizes that this is an illegitimate kid, and he doesn't want to do time in the doghouse with Hera, so he steps down off of his throne, and he looks over the boy, and he's like, what do you want? And he's like, what do you want? And he's like, I don't know. And so they strike up this deal, okay, because Zeus, in his infinite wisdom, recognizes it's better to have Hermes with them than against them, okay? And so he gives Hermes the role of herald. Okay, you will be my messenger. You will be the person who communicates what's going on down there in the mortal world to me, and you will also be the guide of men and women, the companion of men and women. Mercury was famously known as the companion to man. Other gods, you had to go to their temples, and maybe see a statue. Mercury could show up behind you at the supermarket checkout, just hanging out, okay, because he was always running around the earth. I mean, Mercury's the only Greek god who had access to heaven, earth, and hell, and he could travel back up through those routes back again. Okay, so Mercury was the one with the passwords, who knew the ins and outs, who you flattered, who you played dumb with, who you, berated. Okay, so Mercury could get in and out. This is what he does. This is what he does in an astrological chart as well. So ultimately, Zeus says, okay, now, indulge your brother. Okay, and so Hermes leads Apollo to his cattle. And to soothe Apollo's ego, which has been heavily bruised during this entire, situation, okay, he hands Apollo the lyre, okay, and Apollo plays the strings, hears the music, and falls in love. Okay, and this is the thing that's very important in Greece. You'll see it in a lot of paintings. You'll see a lot of flute players. And flute players, they're in Arcadia. They're out there with the shepherds. Flute player, if you played the flute, you couldn't speak. You played a flute. You played music. Okay. If you played the lyre, you recited poetry or you sang a song. Okay. So the lyre has always been associated with civilization. Okay, because you could strum the harp and you could sing, or you could recite poetry and speak. And so this showed that you were a civilized person. This showed that you were, worldly, that you were learned. Okay. And if you're familiar with art history, you know that the two emblems of Apollo are always the laurel wreath, which is worn by poets. Dante famously wears one when he goes to Inferno, Paradisial. But it's the laurel, but it's also the lyre, it's the harp. These are the two identifiers of Apollo. So Hermes Mercury actually adds to Apollo. Okay, he makes Apollo greater than what he was before. So Apollo is very, very happy with his gift of the harp. And as Hermes foretold when he first spotted the tortoise who sacrifices its shell to become the lyre, that tortoise shell or the tortoise truly goes on to become friend of the feast, because the person playing the lyre and reciting poetry or singing was the friend of the feast. They were the entertainment. Okay, so this idea of being able to discover, of like, I know what I can do with this, or this might look like this now, but with a little development play or fiddling around, we could turn it into. These are all the attributes of Mercury. Okay, and it's done through mercurial things, which is playing with. Okay, scribbling out, playing with an idea, fiddling with something. This is the way that Mercury thinks and works out its information. Okay, so it's not just like standing there like the Scarecrow in Wizard of Oz and reciting MC equals whatever squared, or actually that's before Einstein. But anyway, reciting mathematical theorem. Mercury fiddles and it plays and it puts together and it picks apart. Okay, and this is what Mercury does. It's the busyness, the antsiness of Mercury. Okay, and so what we have here is the transactional transactional element of Mercury. He gives Apollo the lyre, and what he gets in return for this with Apollo and for showing up in Olympus, what he gets in return is a place at the table. And that's something that's really important. This is the only god who makes a place for himself at the table when all the places have been taken. Okay, so it's that mercurial part of you, when the door is shut, or like you're too late, or you can't, it's that mercurial part of you that can work out the alternative, the option, the other way to access that. So it's not just like analysis, it's thinking on your feet. It's being shrewd. These are all the qualities of Mercury. And just to sort of end our story here very quickly, there is a tradition in Arcadia, Greece. There is a tradition of cattle theft. Okay, this comes out of what kids really do. Okay, and part of becoming a teenager or whatever was if you could steal the neighbor's cattle successfully. Okay, we have this nowadays with frats. Okay, where you steal the other frat house's mascot or something like that without getting found out. And the whole point is to not get found out. And in Arcadia, if you stole someone's cattle and you got found out, you were punished, and you were punished rather severely. Okay, but if you stole it and didn't get found out, okay, then the person that you stole it from becomes kind of your mentor or becomes your sponsor. You return it and they're like very amused that you did this. And so as a reward, you then are recognized by that person that you took the cattle from as being a very clever person. So this is actually also what the myth comes out of as well. And I just wanted to sort of share that with everyone today, as we're looking forward to our upcoming Mercury retrograde. What it means is we're used to Mercury retrograde as being, don't buy anything, merchandise is going to be bad, all these sorts of things. And it can do that. But during a period of time of Mercury retrograde, the things that we expect to happen in their orderly way don't. Okay, it can be like adding up a list of numbers and getting a different answer every time. Okay, now you can be frustrated and angry, like, what is this? I'll just go to the calculator on my computer and do it. Okay, or if you go back over what you did, why do I keep making the same mistake by adding up these numbers? You discover your misstep. You discover where you went wrong. And this is the lesson of a Mercury retrograde. Okay, it's going to take you back over the ground that you just traversed, and your first reaction might be like, I've already done this, I don't have time for this, but your other reaction might be like, what? I discovered a technicality that I overlooked before. This could have been really dangerous if this had gone forward. This could have imperiled my transaction. Or, what? I think I just found a better way of doing this than what I had originally. So there is, it's because you don't get what you want the first time and you're forced to go back over it another. or it can be mundane, like, you know what, you really needed to replace that coffee maker a long time ago, so go out and buy a new one. But, but the thing is, it forces a double look, a second look. And this second look might alert you to something that could have been perilous, or this second look could show you a better way of doing what you had wanted to do before. And that's something that I would very much want you to keep in mind during the time that Mercury is in retrograde, which is going to be from January 14th until February 4th. So it might be a nuisance, but it may also be the very thing that gets you to prevent something that could have gone south, or to find a better way of doing it.
So good, Christopher. Oh my goodness. You are just so delightful. The storytelling, I mean, I think I've heard that story many times, but the way you just told it just completely brought it to life. And so many of the lessons I feel are actually going to stick. The archetypal qualities and character of Hermes, and that playfulness, and the kind of wily, thinking on his toes, and clever, and then kind of playing dumb. I love the playing dumb, like just sucking on the tongue, being like, I don't know, I'm just a baby.
And you can almost imagine him doing a little fart at the same time. What babies do.
Oh my God, so good. Okay, so from what I'm getting is we almost have, it's almost like we have 2 weeks in 1 week, at least energetically. There's two very different things going on.
Yeah.
So we're starting the week with this Neptune, with the Mars square Neptune. So Mars in Sagittarius square Neptune in Pisces. And the main takeaway from that sort of that piece of energy in the beginning of the week is, if we find ourselves staunchly holding on to a belief system and raising our voice, or getting very emotionally charged around that idea,
right,
you keep in mind that we are playing out a certain aspect of this square.
right.
And we're playing out the Sagittarius, Mars and Sagittarius aspect of the square, and that there is another aspect happening right now, and that is the more uncovering the mysteries, and the more mystical, and the less obviously articulated, some of those things that it's more intuitive based. And so these two things are really squaring off, and we may find ourselves playing one or the other role.
Right.
And if we do find ourselves playing one or the other role, just to be aware of it. I think one of the main things that I just got from everything you just shared is the big picture awareness of these archetypes playing out is really going to enable us to actively choose. Like, oh, whoa, I see myself falling into this trap. So here's the opposing energy that I could open myself up to. Like, oh, if I'm super staunchly holding on to something, then maybe I could soften a little, like the water, and go, well, maybe this, or maybe that. Or, it could be, and also this feeling that I have that I need to really convince this person of my point of view, it is transitory. It's actually I'm not gonna feel this strongly about this soon.
5 days from now, right?
Yeah, 5 days from now. So I can actually maybe just let it go right now, instead of blowing something up if I don't need to, right?
Right. I love the way you just put that. Instead of blowing something up when I don't need to. I think that's gorgeous. That's
okay. Awesome. So that's the beginning of the week. So we have this thing happening, this square thing happening. And then the second part of the week, which we're actually kind of in already, right? Because we're in the shadow period of Mercury retrograde already.
Oh yeah, that shadow stuff. Okay.
Oh, you're not into the shadow. Oh, we can have another conversation about that later.
I work with it, but for the simplicity of understanding the retrograde, I sort of
you just make it clear. Okay.
Right,
all right.
I just want everyone to understand the retrograde.
Right. When it's going to be the strongest. Yeah.
It can get a little shady when you bring in the shadow.
That's right. Okay. So then we have this epic tale of Hermes, and understand in order for us to understand the energy of Hermes, and to see that in our own charts, and to see that ability within each one of us to reassess situations, to look at them from different perspectives, to take it apart and put it back together again. And so instead of being frustrated as things happen during Mercury retrograde. It's like, oh God, I have to go back and do that again. Oh my God. I already did that. Why do I have to do that again? And why? And this is really going to slow me up.
Right.
This is
I
going to
don't have
push my
time.
time. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Instead of really getting caught up in that sort of mindset, because something you said very early on, like jumped out at me. You said, if we have the right mental outlook, then Mercury retrograde doesn't have to be so bad. It doesn't have to be this thing we fear, because we can actually see it as a blessing. It's like, okay, this thing is not working the way I had planned.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if it had gone the way I planned, it would have been disastrous. That's one. And maybe if I can go back to the drawing board and rethink this a little bit, maybe I can make it even better.
Right.
And so this is an opportunity. And even though, again, like it kind of reminds me of this Mars and Sagittarius energy, when we're so attached to something being a certain way, right? Like we think it needs to play out this specific way. That is when we feel the most frustration and energy drain and, all those things that just aren't fun.
Right.
But when we can sort of move with it a little bit and be like that hilarious baby, super clever, and yes, oh my gosh, and really,
I want my mommy.
it's so convenient. I love that. It's like so conveniently innocent and clueless.
And that, my dear, is a beautiful way of putting Mercury, conveniently innocent.
Yes, innocent and clueless, right? Like, I don't know, no idea what happened. Like, I'm just a baby. Yeah. So cute. So, but if we can actually harness some of that energy and that storytelling, I feel will really help us. Like, okay, what would Hermes do?
Right.
What would Mercury do right now?
Right.
This thing's unraveling. This thing is a mess. Whatever it is. And what would Mercury do? How would Mercury approach this in his wiliness?
Well, we could also even throw in, if you want to, pair potentially the Mars Neptune with the Mercury, is don't be an Apollo. In other words, if you've got that Mars Neptune, going through where it's insistent and it's like this, and you're going to be duped by a Mercury retrograde. Okay, so you may be, for instance, maybe you're signing something, making a big decision or whatever. Maybe you've set up something and it has to go a certain way, and you're full of urgency in the middle part of the week. Maybe the retrograde is saying, cool it, take another look, take a couple of steps back, because the retrograde leaves Aquarius and goes into a different sign, and then it comes back into Aquarius again. So it's already indicating a reworking of an original premise. That's already there. So don't be my loud dog's about to go into, but don't be an Apollo,
right,
looking for these cattle and like, where are they? Just like whatever.
Right.
It's open yourself up to, as you were saying, different approaches or different ways of looking at it, or different ways of solving that problem. You can be angry that there's a problem, or it can open you to get more creative and resourceful and innovative with a problem or a challenge.
So we can anticipate these kinds of things coming up as a potential, and this I like the terms too together, like a playful flexibility.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, okay, like, let's play with this situation a little bit instead of taking it so serious. Like, when I think of Apollo and the way that you described him, he's so serious, and like everybody's so like, it has to be so
self.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So we can bring in some of that playfulness and dance a little bit with these situations that are coming up in our lives. I love it. Christopher, if we had to give the week a theme, what would it be? I know there's a lot going on. Like, there's a lot of different kinds of things happening.
If we were to, wow, give it a theme. I think it's kind of like there's I don't know, don't be an Apollo.
And listen to the whole episode so you know what we're saying when we say don't be an Apollo.
Right. It's like, don't be so subscribed. Don't be so subscribed to this one point of view that you're missing out on alternatives that may save you from a situation or actually put you in a better standing with
Ah,
the situation,
okay.
you know.
Yes. Okay. So we're being asked to really take that flexible perspective.
And
Yeah.
experimental. I mean,
Experimental.
you know,
Yes.
I love the words find, meet, discover, you know,
Yes, for sure.
find, meet, discover, you know,
Mhm.
that Mercury only by encountering the tortoise begins to see the lyre, you know, you know, so really kind of take these, it's Mercury, it's very Mercury to do things moment to moment, you know, and in those moments to find, meet, and discover. Be experimental, be playful. Don't be so rigid in your, you know, in what your solution or your view is that you miss out on something that could have tripped you up or on a better way of doing it.
Absolutely. And Christopher, the other thing that Mercury got for himself was a place at the table,
Where
right?
there wasn't a place before. And
Oh,
that's what's important.
yes. He literally created an opportunity that didn't even exist before that
Right.
moment. Ah,
But what else do you want from a god of thresholds and who gets you in through the door? You know, that Olympus with its 11 deities was a fixed exclusive club.
wow.
Okay. There's no place at the table. And so
Wow.
he figures out how to do the sacrifice, how to whatever. He anticipates the strings that create the lyre. He's got something on his dad, which is, do you really want to confess in front of your wife here that, you know,
Right.
you're a legitimate kid? I mean, he's played all these different angles so that what was a closed door, remember Mercury goes in and out of places, goes in and out of doors. What was a closed club, a closed door, he makes a place for himself at the table, and arguably probably becomes one of the most famous gods
Mhm.
or deities of the Olympian pantheon that there is.
Mm. It's reminding me of the word impossible.
Mhm.
I am possible.
Yeah,
So we can, those places where I know a lot of people are experiencing this feeling of doors closing and,
yeah.
real huge changes in their life. So where are those doors going to open for you? And where can you create? And the other thing about Mercury is how strategic he was. I mean, he had this whole thing planned
Right.
out from the very beginning,
Well,
right?
he's spontaneous and strategic.
Yes. Oh,
Okay,
interesting.
so
Yes.
he didn't come up with the plan right at the start. He's curious, okay,
Right.
and he's spontaneous. He's like, oh, turtle, that could be a harp, you know. So the thing that you want to do with Mercury, and this is why Mercury rules the two signs that are opposed, the two Jupiter signs. Okay,
Mm,
the Jupiter signs are going to be your worldview, global, what's going on in the world, the big picture. Okay. Mercury's your moment to moment. It's your day
mm,
to day. Okay, so if you can drop into your moment to moment, your day to day, and you can find those pivot points, you can find those entrees, and you can work out where the loopholes and the exit strategy is. You're living a Mercury life. Okay,
mm.
you're embodying your Mercury. Okay, and Mercury isn't as recognizable when it's retrograde, but in my opinion, that makes him doubly clever.
Mm. In order to do that, you have to be so present. And that is where the baby thing kind of comes in, right? Like babies are so present in the moment. They're not worried about the future. They're not thinking about the past. They're just right in that present moment. And so for you to be able to move from moment to moment and find the opportunities in each moment, you have to be so present. And so, one of the things I know a lot of people are dealing with as well is a lot of anxiety about the future.
Yeah,
So, like, let's rein that in, stay as present as possible, and find the opportunities in each given moment, and really embody this Hermes Mercurial energy.
be,
Do you find that
be
when Mercury is retrograde, because Mercury is closer to the Earth, we're actually experiencing the energy more intensely?
yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I do. Um, yes, I do, because the big word, I mean, words that I left for Mercury are curiosity and spontaneity.
Mm-hmm.
There are the judgments aren't made ahead of time. Okay,
Ah,
it's like, how could this play out? How could I work or play with this? You
uh-huh.
know, Mercury's also the pebble that goes on the herm, like each traveler throws a pebble on a herm and it shows like which of the two paths is the one most traveled, but be the pebble that causes the ripple effect. You can get lost in the big picture and what's going on in the world and these apocalyptic visions of the future, and you can feel drained and emptied out, defeated and immobilized with pessimism. Okay. Or you can drop into your moment to moment. You can discover, you can meet, you can find, and this brings you back into the day-to-day shifts of our lives and the day-to-day invites, the day-to-day opportunities, the day-to-day chances, all of these things that Mercury is associated with.
So good. Christopher, thank you. This has been so wonderful. I just feel like we've got an incredible Greek mythology lesson, lots of astrology thrown in there, incredible storytelling that is just riveting. And I love that too, because we need this lightness right now, like the lightness of stories and just delighting in each other's brilliance. And we just got to do that with you. So thank you so much. For those of you,
thank you.
For those of you who love Christopher, we are going to be doing an incredible course with Christopher coming up in March. It is called The Cosmic Calendar. It's based on his book, The Cosmic Calendar. And it's going to be actually teaching you live a lot of the concepts in the book, and then also how to take your chart and turn it into a calendar for the year. So you can really plan like, okay, when's the time where I'm going to be creating and building? Where's the time where I'm going to be more introspective? And this is going to be based directly on your chart and how it's mapping with the astrology of the year. So that's coming up in March. Registration is not open yet, but you can go to astrologyhub.com/cosmic waitlist. That's I know. I like that. astrologyhub.com/cosmic waitlist. Get on the wait list and you'll be the first to know when registration opens. Again, that's happening in March. And what else was I going to say to close this out? Oh, I didn't ask you the intensity scale.
Oh,
on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not intense at all and 10 being the most intense it could be, what is this week?
I think most of the week is a 3 with maybe a flare up to a 5 or 6-ish on that Mars Neptune square, which is boy, I really have to go look for it. The Mars Neptune square, which is tomorrow. Okay, 11. There might be a flare up there. So we might go from a 3-ish to a 5 or something like that. But then, by the way, the 12th, if you're doing transactions, perfect day for transactions is the 12th. And then as we go into the rest of the week, we're getting ready for the Mercury Retrograde. So I think it's going to be more 3-ish. It's not going to be. This isn't a don't look up week or something like that. No asteroid coming towards us this week.
That is really nice to hear. That's really. I haven't seen that movie yet. Have you?
No, I hear mixed things about it, but
I hear mixed things as well.
Yeah. But no, what's really, really nice, and what I love that you said is that, we get so caught up in the big stuff, and it's nice to drop into the little stuff because there's a lot of important stuff. There's a lot of profundity in what we think is small.
Yeah.
And that's a very important Mercury thing.
Well, and it's the things we can actually do something about.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, those big ones, it's like, what are we going to, like, the only thing we can really do is the thing in the moment in our lives. Well, Christopher, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you for helping us kick off our new format with so much fun and so much joy and so much learning. Really, really appreciate you. And I thank all of you for being here. As always, it's so nice to be back with you. It felt like forever. I mean, we had the forecast event in the beginning of December, so we were very focused on that. And then we decided to take a break as a company, which we haven't done in 6 years.
Wow.
I know. It was funny because the break got so filled with so much stuff. It was like, we need to take a break on really mellow astrology instead of taking a break on intense astrology, because it was just, there was, I feel very relaxing. I will say that. However, it was really nice to have the space to go through the things that needed to happen. And I just really appreciate all of you for coming back and picking up where we left off. And I look forward to an incredible year with all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. And thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. Tomorrow, I will be on with Thomas Miller. So if you don't know Thomas, you'll get to meet him. We'll be talking about 2022 and his read on the energies. And then next week, he will be our weatherman for the astrological weather.
Wow, can't wait.
I know, me too, Christopher. Okay, thank you so much. And I can't wait to see you soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye.